The deep dive is back. And today we are tackling, well, one of the strangest paradoxes of the modern world. Technology is all about cold, hard logic, right?
Yeah.
But we find ourselves just incapable of interacting with sophisticated machines without this powerful, often overwhelming emotional response.
Right.
So we're asking why? Why does your emotional brain consistently override your rational brain when you're looking at something you know is just metal and code?
And it's not just a question about the technology. It's a really profound look at the core mechanics of human empathy itself.
So what are we working with?
We've got a whole stack of research and notes here, everything from studies on anthropomorphism and attachment theory to analyses of ethics and companion robotics.
Okay.
And the goal is to figure out exactly why we form these powerful, complicated, and, often really surprising emotional bonds with these inanimate things.
So our mission today is a deep dive into the specific psychological, even biological triggers that cause you to feel genuine distress when a machine seems to be harmed.
And then we have to get into the ethical side.
The really heavy, immediate ethical implications of this new reality, especially as these technologies move into our most vulnerable social spaces.
And to start, we have to use the single most counterintuitive finding in all of our source material.
It's the anecdote that just perfectly captures the sheer irrationality of this human reflex.
Yeah.
We're going back to 2007. There's a test being conducted by the U.S. military. They were testing a new robot designed specifically for defusing landmines. And you have to picture this thing. It was shaped kind of like a massive, sophisticated stick insect. Its entire purpose was self-sacrifice.
It was pure, brutal, utilitarian design. The robot's job was to walk into a live minefield, step on a mine.
You're blown up.
Right. Sacrifice one of its legs, and then just continue moving on the remaining ones until the path was clear. It was a tool explicitly designed to be damaged and keep working.
A tool designed to fail, but functionally. But here's the twist that stopped the entire operation.
Yeah, this part is amazing.
A high-ranking military officer, the one in charge of the test, he called the whole thing off. He stopped it.
Why?
Because he deemed it too inhumane to watch the damaged robot drag its body along after losing a leg.
Just think about the context for a second. This is a military operation. High stakes, high cost, totally rational.
Completely.
And yet, the sight of a machine doing exactly what it was designed to do triggered an emotional response so strong, it halted official proceedings.
Human empathy just overrode the core operational goals.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Because that military anecdote, I mean, it's shocking, but it still feels a little distant. You probably haven't been in a minefield lately.
Right, but the same reflex plays out in our living rooms.
Every day.
It really does. Let's take a much simpler example. The Pleo baby dinosaur robot.
Oh yeah, I remember this.
It was basically a toy, but it was packed with these sensory feedback loops.
So our sources described it as having a bunch of sensors, right? Including a tilt sensor.
Exactly. So if you held the Pleo upside down, maybe to change its battery or just because you're curious.
It was programmed to make this distressed, crying sound.
And that's it. That's where the conflict starts. The person holding it knows rationally, this is a piece of plastic and circuits. It's a pre-programmed toy.
But then it starts making that sound, that crying.
And shaking a little bit because it's upside down. And there is this undeniable, powerful, immediate urge to turn it back over.
You want to comfort its simulated distress.
You do.
That's the whole dilemma right there, isn't it? Your emotional brain sees motion, hears distress, and it just responds. Something needs help.
While your rational brain is screaming, it's a plastic toy, just turn it off.
But in that split second, the emotional response, it almost always wins. Why is that? Why don't we have a better rational filter for this stuff?
That's the fascinating part. The why is rooted in deep, ancient biology. As a species, we are fundamentally hardwired to project intent and life agency onto any autonomous movement in our physical space.
You mean we're wired to assume if something moves on its own, it's alive?
Basically, yeah. It was a crucial survival instinct, honed over millennia. You had to assume that movement in the grass was a predator, not the wind.
And we call that mental projection anthropomorphism.
Exactly. It's that unconscious, automatic process of treating robots, or really any object, as if they have human mental states, beliefs, desires.
Or in the case of the crying Pleo, distress.
Right. And designers are masters at exploiting this. They engineer these machines with specific features, a certain eye placement, a specific way of moving.
That automatically trigger those primitive empathetic associations in our minds. Yeah. They're hacking our oldest survival instinct to make us bond with a product.
And what the sources show is that it's way more than just a momentary trigger. These bonds become real, they become stable, and they become long-term.
Really?
They absolutely do. We see evidence in studies looking at long-term human-robot coworker scenarios.
So people working alongside machines for a long time.
Yeah. And when the robots are intentionally removed from the work environment, the human participants report real, measurable emotional distress. And those feelings persist long after the machine is gone.
So it's not just the cute eyes, it's the reliance, the shared experience. That continuity of interaction builds a powerful attachment that's strong enough to override the knowledge that it's just a machine.
You start to care about the entity because of the role it played in your life, not because of what it's made of.
Which brings up the question of, well, where do these things fit in our social landscape? They're not people, but they're clearly not just hammers or toasters either.
And that brings us to what our sources call the animal analogy, which is a framework I find incredibly useful here.
Okay, what's that?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it makes perfect sense. Historically, humans domesticated animals for a huge variety of roles.
Sure. For work, as weapons, as companions.
Exactly. And we developed different ethical standards for each category. You treat a service dog very differently than you treat a steer bred for food or a working mule.
So robots are following a similar path. The animal analogy suggests we'll naturally apply different levels of emotional investment and ethical consideration depending on the robot's job.
But the moment you define something as a companion or worthy of kindness, and you allow that deep emotional attachment, you open the door to some pretty unique commercial risks.
That's the commercial dark side.
Right.
Companies aren't just selling hardware anymore, they're selling relationships. And if you form a strong protective bond with your companion robot, the companies that make them gain a very powerful tool for profit.
We're talking about exploitation rooted in emotion. Imagine getting a push notification that your companion needs an expensive care update.
Or that its battery is failing and you need to buy a premium anti-aging module.
Yes. Preying on your strong emotional desire to care for and maintain your friend, your emotional vulnerability becomes a financial liability.
And nowhere are these stakes higher or these ethical lines fuzzier than in the context of elderly care.
Yeah, this is where the pressure is immense.
We saw some survey results, specifically from Germany, that showed a really surprising level of acceptance.
It was shocking. 1 in 3 young people aged 14 to 19 are already open to machine assistance for their grandparents.
And even more critically, 1 in 5 people over the age of 70 are also open to the idea of mechanical help. So the mental barrier is clearly eroding fast.
Which brings us to the gold standard of therapeutic success in this field.
The robotic baby seal, known as PARO.
PARO is meticulously engineered specifically to provide comfort and companionship in nursing homes, particularly for patients who are struggling with dementia.
So what is it? It's small, it's fluffy, cute.
And remarkably responsive to touch and sound, which is absolutely crucial for therapeutic success.
And the studies on its outcomes are pretty compelling. Research consistently indicates that interacting with PARO reduces dementia-related behaviors, especially agitation and aggression.
And it significantly improves social engagement among patients. The results are, well, they're often comparable to those from live animal therapy.
So PARO succeeds because it fills the gap. It fulfills that fundamental human desire for consistent, non-demanding companionship.
Right, without any of the big challenges you get with human or animal caregivers. Things like fatigue, emotional burnout, allergies. It's always available, and it never judges.
But the moment you say that PARO is comparably effective to a human or an animal, the big ethical worry pops up.
Are we giving vulnerable people robots instead of human care?
It sounds like substitution, which just feels inherently wrong.
It does, and that's a valid fear. What's fascinating here, though, is the proponents' counter-argument.
Which is?
They argue that PARO usually replaces animal therapy, which often isn't viable in clinical settings because of, infections or allergies. It's not necessarily replacing human interaction.
But you have to admit that in reality, those boundaries are constantly blurring, especially when care resources are scarce.
And that blurring takes us to the truly difficult ethical landscape where the source material highlighted some critical missing rules. We just don't have established protocols for these powerful bonds we're creating.
What do you mean?
Think about this. What happens when a patient with cognitive decline develops such a deep, real emotional attachment to a robot like PARO, that taking it away would cause genuine psychological harm.
It would be unethical to take it away.
Exactly. But it's just a machine.
Yeah.
We lack clear guidelines for managing this, particularly with vulnerable populations who are so susceptible to this kind of emotional deception.
There are no rules for decommissioning a companion robot that has become an emotional pillar for someone.
And you have to amplify that pressure point with the data on staffing shortages. The source material projects a staggering shortage of 400,000 care workers in Germany alone by 2030.
Wow.
When human resources are that scarce, the pressure to slide from technology supplementing care to technology replacing it becomes almost impossible to resist.
So let's pivot and address the core ethics of the deception itself. Is it ethical to design a machine specifically to fool vulnerable people into believing it cares for them?
It raises huge questions beyond just informed consent. You have to consider the risk of infantilization, treating elderly adults as if they're children who can be easily placated.
And there are serious equity concerns. You have to ensure that only affluent care settings aren't the only ones getting this level of emotional support tech.
And for individuals with cognitive decline, their increased susceptibility to emotional deception means the importance of informed consent, or even proxy consent, is exponentially magnified.
You are essentially designing a technology that bypasses rational awareness to trigger a primal emotional response.
And then there is the even more subtle long-term societal risk, one we might not even notice until the effects are deeply ingrained.
What's that?
This is the concept of assimilation-induced dehumanization.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
This is the idea that by attributing these limited, simplistic, human-like minds to robots, robots that are happy or sad or neutral, we might inadvertently start to diminish our perception of emotional complexity and depth in actual people.
Exactly. If we get used to interacting with a machine that only simulates 3 or 4 basic emotional states, this really shallow pool of empathy that's designed to be easily readable.
Will we start expecting that same level of emotional simplicity from our human colleagues, our neighbors, our family members?
If we become habitually accustomed to easily managed, predictable, non-demanding emotional interactions with machines, the complex, messy, contradictory reality of human emotion might start to feel like an unacceptable burden.
We risk training ourselves to devalue the full, complicated spectrum of human emotionality simply because we're used to the simplified version the robot gives us.
And that's why the crucial question for the coming decades isn't just, do humans empathize with robots? It's, how will robots fundamentally change human empathy?
Right. Consider the negative possibilities. If a child repeatedly interacts with a sophisticated robotic dog, kicking it, yelling at it, because they know intellectually it's just a robot.
Might that behavior bleed over?
Exactly. Might they become more likely to kick a real dog? Or treat a sensitive classmate with less regard simply because they've gotten used to a lack of consequence for cruelty?
This echoes the debates we've had for years about media violence, but it adds a new, visceral, physical component that wasn't there before.
But the sources also force us to acknowledge the immense positive potential.
Oh, absolutely. We see that in specific therapeutic settings. Robot-assisted therapy, for instance, has shown tremendous promise for children with autism or even for incarcerated populations.
Why is that?
Because the robot offers a perfectly predictable, non-judgmental interaction partner. This consistency allows individuals who struggle with the unpredictability of human social cues to practice and refine their empathetic responses in a safe, controlled environment.
So the robot can be a stepping stone, a tool for retraining the empathetic circuits.
It can. So habitual robot interactions could, in fact, reshape empathetic responses positively in human and human-animal contexts. It's a double-edged sword.
A tool that can either diminish or refine our humanity, depending entirely on how we design it and deploy it.
This entire journey, from a soldier stopping a military test to the philosophical risk of diminishing human emotional complexity, it just underscores the speed at which this technology is advancing compared to our understanding of ourselves.
So this means the key takeaway for you, the listener, is the urgent need for ongoing societal dialogue and critical engagement. We can't wait for a tragedy. We need to develop ethical, commercial, and psychological frameworks now.
Before these emotional bonds are formed everywhere and the technology becomes indispensable in these vulnerable settings, we need to figure out how to live responsibly with these things, not just how to build them.
Every time we design a machine that triggers an emotional response, we're basically building a mirror that reflects our own needs back at us.
And potentially redefines what those needs even mean.
So what does this all mean? We've reached a point where we have to seriously develop ethical guidelines for situations where we cannot or should not take a companion robot away, even though we know it has no feelings, no consciousness, no internal life.
Mm.
What does that necessity say about the definition of human emotional dependence in the 21st century? We are creating objects that reflect our need for connection so powerfully that their removal causes genuine distress, turning a piece of plastic and wire into an emotional pillar. Think about that powerful, unavoidable need the next time you see a robot that's designed to be cute.